I had searched deep within my heart and spirit, and I wanted to make a change and move to a new place.
What if everything you thought you knew about the origins of modern science was only half the story? Behind the familiar names and celebrated discoveries lies a fascinating web of forgotten knowledge, suppressed ideas, and overlooked thinkers who helped shape the world as we know it. This video will take you on an eye-opening journey through time, challenging mainstream narratives and unveiling the hidden forces that influenced the scientific revolution.
Well, we sort of expected it. One nice thing about this record is that it was delivered to every concert goer via AEG and NPG.
In the world of modern music, few figures have left a mark as bold and far-reaching as Prince Rogers Nelson. Known simply as Prince, the Minneapolis-born artist wasn't just a multi-instrumentalist, composer, and performer. He was a creative force who reshaped pop, funk, and R&B with his fearless experimentation and unapologetic individuality. With hits like Purple Rain, When Doves Cry, and Kiss, Prince carved out a space that belonged entirely to him. But behind the legendary songs and flamboyant stage presence was a man with an intense commitment to his artistic vision and very strong opinions about the direction of the music industry and the artists within it. Prince's perfectionism was widely acknowledged by those who worked with him. He was known to record dozens of takes of a song, endlessly revisiting arrangements and performances until the final product felt right to him. But this drive for artistic excellence didn't stop at his own work. He held others to similarly high standards, and he wasn't afraid to express disappointment when he felt that certain artists were diluting the power of music. For Prince, music wasn't just entertainment, it was a deeply emotional, spiritual experience. Something had to be felt, not just heard. In a 1985 interview with Rolling Stone, Prince was quoted as saying, "There's no such thing as perfect, but there is such a thing as unacceptable." This quote has often been cited as a summary of his artistic philosophy. He believed music should provoke, move, and challenge the listener. It shouldn't be safe, polished for radio, or designed by committee. It had to be real. And for him, that authenticity was something that many commercially successful artists lacked. Prince didn't often call people out directly in interviews, but those who were close to him, band members, sound engineers, and tour managers, have over the years shared insights into the artists he reportedly didn't respect musically. His critiques weren't always personal, they often stemmed from a belief that certain musicians were more interested in fame and record sales than innovation or emotional truth. One artist who allegedly drew Prince's disapproval was Michael Bolton. Known for his powerful vocals and romantic ballads, Bolton enjoyed massive commercial success in the late 1000s 980s and early 1000s 990s. Songs like How Am I Supposed to Live Without You and his cover of When a Man Loves a Woman dominated radio charts, earning him Grammys and a loyal fan base. But in Prince's eyes, Bolton's music represented something he opposed: the softening or sanitization of soul music. According to music journalist Alan Light, Prince once remarked to members of his band that Bolton wouldn't know soul if it slapped him in his processed hair. The comment, though never publicly confirmed by Prince, reportedly spread quickly through industry circles. It was the kind of sharp, offhand critique Prince was known to make in private. While some may have dismissed it as playful shade, others saw it as a genuine reflection of Prince's view that Bolton's music lacked depth and authenticity. For Prince, soul music was more than a genre. It was an emotional language born out of struggle, identity, and experience. He believed that the best soul music came from vulnerability and experimentation, not from following formulas or chasing hits. While Bolton's powerful vocal delivery was admired by many, Prince reportedly felt that it lacked the rawness and honesty that defined real soul music. To him, it was too polished, too safe. Music that borrowed the style of black music traditions but stripped away the pain, the passion, and the edge. In an interview with a Dutch magazine in 1993, Prince said, "There are people who take the heart out of music, sterilize it, and sell it back to you." While he didn't name anyone directly, many close to him believe this was a veiled reference to artists like Bolton. It's important to note that Prince never engaged in a public feud with Bolton. There were no direct confrontations, no diss tracts, or interviews filled with insults, but his distaste was reportedly evident in private moments. One such moment came in 1994 at an industry event. Both Prince and Bolton were in attendance, and according to witnesses, Prince made a conscious effort to avoid being seen or photographed with him. He allegedly whispered to an assistant, "Some associations you can't wash off." Again, Prince didn't make these opinions part of his public persona, but among those in the know, it was clear where he stood. Interestingly, Michael Bolton has always spoken respectfully about Prince. After Prince's passing in 2016, Bolton referred to him as a musical genius and acknowledged his influence on the industry. Whether Bolton was aware of Prince's reported disdain or not is unclear, but he never responded publicly to any of the rumors. If anything, Bolton seemed to take the high road, focusing instead on his own work and legacy. It's tempting to reduce these kinds of reported tensions to simple personal dislike, but with Prince, it often went deeper than that. His critiques were rooted in a belief that music had a purpose beyond chart positions or sales figures. He wanted artists to challenge the status quo, to innovate and take risks, and to stay true to themselves. When artists didn't do that, when they conformed to trends or delivered what he saw as watered-down versions of genres he loved, he took notice. The rivalry, if it can be called that, between Prince and Michael Bolton wasn't one of direct attacks or media spectacle. It was quieter, more philosophical. Prince saw himself as a guardian of a certain kind of musical integrity, and, in his view, Bolton simply didn't meet the mark. That doesn't mean Bolton's music didn't resonate with millions of listeners. It clearly did. But for Prince, that wasn't enough. Popularity wasn't proof of quality. Emotional impact, originality, and authenticity were what mattered most. What this story illustrates is just how seriously Prince took his role as an artist. He wasn't content to make great music. He wanted to elevate the standard for what music could and should be. And while he wasn't shy about expressing disappointment, even frustration, toward those he believed weren't living up to that standard, he did so in a way that was often private, indirect, and focused on the music rather than the person. Prince's legacy is built not only on his immense talent, but on his uncompromising approach to creativity. He held himself to a higher standard, and by extension, he held others to that same bar. Whether you agree with his assessment of artists like Michael Bolton or not, there's no denying that Prince's passion for music ran deep. He wasn't afraid to be critical, because he believed music mattered that much. In the 2900 ATS, few artists shaped pop culture as dramatically as Prince and Madonna. Both were icons in their own right, provocative, creative, and unafraid to challenge social norms through music, fashion, and performance. Given their shared label, similar timelines, and mutual global fame, many would assume they were allies or even collaborators. But behind the scenes, Prince and Madonna reportedly had a complex relationship, one marked by professional tension and artistic disagreement. Their first significant interaction happened in the mid-1000s, 980s, when Warner Brothers reportedly considered pairing them for a duet. At the time, Madonna was gaining global recognition with albums like a Virgin, and Prince had already established himself as a trailblazer with 1999 and Purple Rain. According to Prince's former sound engineer Susan Rogers, when the idea of a duet came up, Prince dismissed it outright. He allegedly remarked, "She's got about as much musicality as this soundboard." Whether or not those were his exact words, the sentiment was clear. Prince didn't see Madonna as a musical equal. This reaction may seem surprising considering both artists were known for their bold, genre-defying styles. But Prince's standards for what he considered real music were incredibly specific. He valued musicianship, live instrumentation, songwriting depth, and emotional authenticity. He didn't shy away from theatrics or sexual expression in his own performances, but he reportedly viewed Madonna's approach as more about image than substance. Throughout the late 80s and early 90s, their careers continued on parallel but divergent tracks. Prince released experimental albums and maintained strict creative control over his output, often playing most of the instruments himself and resisting commercial formulas. Meanwhile, Madonna was reinventing her public persona with each album, blending fashion, religion, and sexuality into performance art that generated media attention and record sales. In a 1987 interview, Prince reportedly criticized the trend of focusing on visual branding over musical substance. He said, "Musical innovation is dying because people are more concerned with selling images than creating them." Though he didn't name Madonna, many observers at the time saw the comment as a direct reference to her, especially given how prominently her career revolved around shifting visual identity. Despite the underlying tension, there were moments of collaboration. In 1989, Prince and Madonna did work together briefly on the track Love Song for Madonna's Like a Prayer album. The song, which they co-wrote and recorded, remains one of their few official collaborations. According to those involved in the sessions, their working relationship was polite but distant. There was mutual respect for each other's fame, but not necessarily for each other's musical approach. One moment that reportedly brought their tension into public view occurred in 1994 when Madonna attended one of Prince's legendary after-shows. These small, often impromptu performances were a way for Prince to connect more intimately with fans and test out material. During the performance, witnesses claim Prince changed the lyrics of his song Sexy MF while looking directly at Madonna, altering the words to say, "She's not sexy." Madonna reportedly left the venue soon after. Whether it was intended as a jab or just Prince being provocative, the moment added fuel to long-standing rumors of rivalry. Madonna, for her part, didn't remain entirely silent. When Prince changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol in the early 1990s to protest his record contract with Warner Bros., Madonna famously referred to him in interviews as the artist formerly known as Relevant. While likely said in jest, the remark highlighted their underlying creative differences and occasional jabs at one another's choices. Despite these reports, neither artist ever fully confirmed a personal feud, and over time there were signs of mutual recognition, at least on a professional level. After Prince's passing in 2016, Madonna posted tributes on social media, calling him a true original and a genius. She also performed a tribute medley in his honor at the Billboard Music Awards later that year. Some fans criticized the performance, suggesting Prince wouldn't have approved, but others saw it as a genuine act of respect. From Prince's perspective, what likely bothered him most wasn't Madonna's fame or her ability to command attention. It was the calculated nature of her career. According to former bandmate Bobby Z, Prince once said about Madonna, "She knows exactly what she's doing. Every move, every outfit, every word, nothing is real." In Prince's worldview, this level of calculated performance removed the spontaneity and emotional truth he believed music should deliver. It's worth noting that Prince himself was hardly low-key when it came to performance. He wore sequined outfits, played up his sexuality on stage, and built entire personas around each album. But those who worked with him say his stage presence came from a place of sincere self-expression, not marketing strategy. The difference, in his view, was that he was using performance to amplify his message, not to mask it. Their artistic philosophies simply didn't align. Madonna built her empire by transforming herself with each era: material girl, dominatrix, spiritual seeker, political provocateur. She understood the mechanics of pop culture and used them to stay relevant for decades. Prince, on the other hand, rebelled against the very idea of staying on trend. He challenged record labels, wrote music that often defied genre classification, and refused to explain his lyrics or decisions in interviews. Interestingly, both artists managed to maintain control over their careers in a male-dominated industry, which makes their reported rivalry even more fascinating. In many ways, they were two sides of the same coin, both fiercely independent, both boundary pushers, and both unwilling to play by anyone else's rules. But where Madonna embraced the media circus, Prince often tried to operate outside of it. Their story isn't just one of personal tension, it's also a reflection of two different approaches to fame and artistry. One saw pop music as a platform for reinvention and spectacle. The other saw it as a sacred craft that demanded purity and depth. Neither approach is inherently right or wrong, but for Prince, the latter was the only acceptable path. If there was any lingering tension between them, it was overshadowed by the legacy each left behind. Prince's influence can be heard in the music of countless artists who value authenticity and musical versatility. Madonna's legacy, meanwhile, lives on in artists who use image, fashion, and performance to make cultural statements. What's perhaps most telling is that despite their differences, both artists reached the highest levels of global fame, proving that there's more than one way to change the world through music. Their reported rivalry didn't lead to public fallouts or long-standing hostility. It was quieter, more philosophical, and rooted in contrasting visions of what pop music should be. And maybe that's what makes it interesting. It wasn't about jealousy or personal animosity. It was about how two of the most influential artists of the 20th century looked at the same industry through entirely different lenses. For Prince, Madonna's approach seemed superficial, a carefully calculated performance. For Madonna, Prince may have seemed overly serious, perhaps even elitist in his expectations, but together, their tension highlighted the wide range of what pop music could encompass. As we continue exploring other artists Prince reportedly had strong opinions about, one thing becomes clear. He didn't dislike others for success alone. What troubled him was when that success, in his view, came at the expense of artistic substance. And that's why, despite their similarities, Madonna landed on Prince's internal list of artists who, though talented in their own way, didn't live up to his standards of what music was truly meant to be. Prince's relationship with the music industry was always complex. He lived and breathed musical innovation, and he expected others to bring the same level of sincerity, creativity, and respect to their craft. He wasn't known for naming names publicly, but those close to him have often shared insights into how he really felt about certain artists. In this part of our exploration, we look at two acts that reportedly drew Prince criticism, not necessarily for who they were as people, but for how their approach to music contrasted with his own values. Those artists were Maroon 5 and the Black Eyed Peas. Maroon 5 is one of the most commercially successful bands of the 21st century. Blending elements of pop, funk, and rock, the group found mainstream success with hits like This Love, She Will Be Loved, and Moves Like Jagger. Their sound has evolved over time, becoming more pop-driven and polished with each album. In 2012, the band recorded a cover of Prince's iconic track, Kiss, during the sessions for their album Overexposed. The cover wasn't released as a lead single, but it quickly caught attention online and among fans of Prince. To understand why this cover reportedly struck a nerve with Prince, it helps to look at the original song. Kiss, released in 1986, is one of Prince's most well-known tracks, celebrated for its stripped-down arrangement and infectious groove. The original version featured minimal instrumentation, a sparse drum machine beat, a funky guitar riff, and Prince's falsetto vocals. It was intentionally raw, leaving space for the rhythm and vocal performance to breathe. Prince often spoke about the importance of space in music, comparing the silence between notes to the negative space in a painting. He believed those gaps created tension, energy, and emotional depth. According to a former engineer who worked at Prince's Paisley Park studios when Prince heard the Maroon 5 cover, he didn't hold back. He reportedly said, "They took all the spaces out of the music. The spaces are as important as the notes." It wasn't that Prince hated covers in general. Other artists had successfully reinterpreted his songs in ways he respected, but in this case he felt the core essence of the song had been lost. Maroon 5's version added layers of production, including extra guitars, backing vocals and effects that Prince reportedly felt cluttered the simplicity that made the original powerful. The issue wasn't just about production choices, it was about interpretation. Kiss wasn't written to be a big pop anthem, it was meant to be intimate, playful, and minimal. By turning it into a more radio-friendly full-band arrangement, Maroon 5 unintentionally stripped away the qualities that Prince had spent hours refining. According to people close to him, Prince saw this as a misunderstanding of the song's intent, and by extension, a misunderstanding of his musical philosophy. During a small club performance in 2013, Prince reportedly addressed the topic in his usual cryptic way. Before launching into Kiss, he told the audience, "Some songs don't need to be covered. Some songs need to be undressed, not dressed up." While he didn't name Maroon 5 directly, many interpreted the comment as a reference to their version of the song. It was typical of Prince to let his music do the talking, rather than engage in open confrontation. Tension around the cover escalated further when Maroon 5's frontman, Adam Levine, said in a radio interview that Prince had given his blessing for the recording. According to Prince's former manager Albert Magnoli, Prince was furious when he heard this. He reportedly called Magnoli immediately and said, "I never approved anything. They never reached out." There were even discussions about possible legal action, but Prince ultimately decided it wasn't worth the time or energy. While the situation didn't turn into a public feud, it added to the narrative that Prince was deeply protective of his music, not just legally, but artistically. For him, a cover wasn't just a re-recording, it was a reinterpretation, and that came with a responsibility to honor the intent of the original. In Prince's eyes, Maroon 5 had taken a personal, intentionally minimal song and turned it into a product, losing the magic that made it special. The next group on Prince's reported list of disliked artists is the Black Eyed Peas. Known for their high-energy performances, catchy hooks, and genre-blending approach, the Black Eyed Peas dominated the charts in the late 2000s with songs like Boom Boom Pow, I Got a Feeling, and Meet Me Halfway. Their sound incorporated elements of hip-hop, dance, and electronic music, often using heavy production techniques like auto-tune, sampling, and digital effects. Prince, who had strong opinions about digital processing and overproduction, reportedly took issue with the band's musical direction. According to a musician in Prince's circle, the conflict began around 2009 when Prince attended an industry event where will.i.am was DJing. After just 10 minutes, Prince quietly left the venue. When asked about it later, he allegedly said, "That's not music, that's a marketing meeting." This comment, while harsh, reflects a recurring theme in Prince's critique of the music industry. He believed that too much modern pop music had become a product rather than an art form. It was engineered to perform well on streaming platforms, radio, and social media, but it lacked soul. In a 2010 interview, Prince discussed his discomfort with music that was overly quantized and processed. Without naming names, he said, "When you quantize everything and auto-tune the soul out of it, what are you left with? Plastic." The Black Eyed Peas, with their polished sound and focus on mass appeal, likely represented what Prince feared music was becoming. The group often relied on digital tools to create tightly constructed pop songs that were meant to be instantly catchy. Prince, on the other hand, was known for recording live instruments, avoiding overdubs, and preserving small imperfections that he believed gave music its humanity. There was another point of tension in 2010, when both Prince and the Black Eyed Peas were involved in Super Bowl performances. Prince had delivered his now legendary halftime show in 2007, performing in the rain with a live band and no backing tracks. The Peas were scheduled to headline the 2011 halftime show, and according to production staff, there was a plan to film a promotional segment featuring past and future performers. Prince reportedly refused to participate. When asked why, he allegedly told his band, "Some people make music, some people manufacture it." Later that same year, Prince reportedly watched the Peas perform at the Grammy Awards and shared his thoughts with members of the New Power Generation, his backing band. One will last forever, he reportedly said, referring to authentic music. The other has an expiration date. Once again, Prince's issue wasn't necessarily personal. He didn't publicly insult the Black Eyed Peas, and he never confronted them in interviews or press statements. But his reported comments suggested deep discomfort with the way popular music was evolving. Faster, shinier, and more reliant on technology. For Prince, music was meant to connect on a deeper level. It wasn't just background noise for clubs or commercials. It was a spiritual experience. His reactions to artists like Maroon 5 and the Black Eyed Peas reveal a consistent pattern. He admired those who took risks, broke boundaries, and stayed true to their vision. He was wary of those who prioritized trends, convenience, or commercial success over emotional truth. Whether or not these artists ever intended to offend Prince or copy his style is unclear. But in his view, the heart of the music was missing, and that was reason enough for concern. Prince never stopped standing up for what he believed music should be. Even if his views were sometimes seen as old-fashioned or overly critical, they came from a place of deep love for the art form. His legacy continues to challenge artists today to think about not just what music sounds like, but what it means and why it matters. Across the world, the relationship between civil liberties and national security has always been a topic of contention. Governments must maintain safety and order, yet this can sometimes lead to encroachments on the rights and freedoms of citizens. In the digital age, this tension has only become more pronounced, especially as the lines between domestic and international threats blur. As a result, many nations have introduced laws, surveillance programs, and emergency powers that give governments more control, particularly in times of crisis. In the wake of significant global events, like the September 11 attacks, the Arab Spring, and more recently the COVID-19 pandemic, many states have restructured or tightened their legal and technological frameworks in the name of national security. These steps often aim to preempt potential risks, but critics argue they can also restrict free expression, undermine privacy, and erode democratic checks and balances. One of the most widely debated issues in this domain is the use of mass surveillance systems by both democratic and authoritarian regimes. The rationale behind such programs is usually to identify security threats before they manifest into violence. However, the expansion of these systems often raises serious concerns about overreach. For example, in countries like China, surveillance has been deeply embedded into public infrastructure. CCTV cameras, facial recognition technology, and digital ID systems are used to monitor citizens' movements and behaviors. While this level of monitoring is presented as a tool for crime prevention and public safety, it also enables tight control over dissent and public opinion. This kind of state control tends to become especially visible during times of political unrest, or when there is widespread public dissatisfaction. By contrast, liberal democracies have traditionally maintained strong legal barriers against state surveillance. However, over the past 2 decades, many Western countries have gradually loosened these restrictions. The Patriot Act in the United States, for example, significantly expanded the government's ability to access personal data and conduct electronic surveillance. In the UK, the Investigatory Powers Act grants broad authority to law enforcement and intelligence agencies to intercept communications. Although such measures are framed as temporary or focused solely on protecting the public, they often become permanent components of national security policy. This issue becomes even more complicated when considering the role of private companies in enabling surveillance. Many of the technologies that make widespread monitoring possible, such as AI-powered software, facial recognition tools, and data collection platforms, are developed and maintained by the private sector. Governments often contract these companies or purchase their tools, creating a close relationship between state security and corporate interests. This blurring of lines raises questions about transparency, accountability, and the influence of profit motives on public policy. Meanwhile, freedom of expression, another essential part of civil liberty, has been impacted by these evolving security measures. In countries with limited press freedom or weak democratic institutions, laws that were originally intended to stop terrorism or disinformation are often used to silence journalists, activists, and opposition figures. For example, vague anti-terror laws have been used in several countries to arrest individuals for criticizing the government online. These actions are often justified under the banner of preserving national unity or preventing social unrest, even though they may violate international human rights norms. Another trend tied to national security is the increasing use of emergency powers. Governments often invoke emergency measures to bypass regular procedures in times of crisis, such as during natural disasters, health emergencies, or civil unrest. While this can be necessary to act quickly and decisively, there is always a risk that such powers can be misused or extended beyond their original purpose. The COVID-19 pandemic offered a clear example of this dynamic. Across the world, lockdowns, travel restrictions, and digital tracking measures were introduced rapidly. In many countries, these restrictions were accepted as necessary to curb the spread of the virus. However, in some places, emergency powers continued long after the immediate danger had passed, raising concerns about normalizing such tools of control. In countries with more robust institutional checks and independent courts, emergency measures are often subject to review and limited in duration. But even in democratic states, some experts warn that these tools can gradually shift the balance of power, especially if the public becomes desensitized to state intrusion over time. The key issue is whether such powers are scaled back once the immediate crisis ends, or whether they become a permanent part of the legal framework. Technology plays a major role in this shift. Surveillance no longer means someone physically watching over you. Instead, it involves complex systems that collect data from mobile phones, online activity, biometric databases, and even social media posts. With advances in machine learning, these systems can analyze massive volumes of data to identify patterns and flag behaviors considered suspicious. But the criteria for what is deemed suspicious is often opaque, and the accuracy of algorithmic predictions is still a matter of debate. What's more, there are growing fears about the disproportionate impact of these measures on marginalized communities. Facial recognition software has been shown to have higher error rates when identifying individuals with darker skin tones, for example. This has raised concerns about discriminatory policing and the risk of wrongful arrests or harassment. Similarly, critics point out that counter-terrorism measures have often been applied unevenly, with minority groups bearing the brunt of heightened surveillance and policing. On the international stage, the tension between civil liberties and national security is also reflected in the way governments treat foreign threats. With cyber attacks, foreign propaganda, and disinformation campaigns on the rise, many countries have adopted more aggressive cybersecurity measures. These include restricting access to foreign apps, banning certain types of online content, and pressuring tech companies to cooperate with national intelligence services. While these strategies aim to protect the integrity of public discourse and national infrastructure, they can also limit the flow of information and justify censorship. This brings up another important consideration: the role of the judiciary in protecting individual rights. In democratic systems, courts play a crucial role in reviewing whether state actions are lawful and proportionate. Over the past decade, legal challenges to surveillance programs, emergency laws, and censorship have been mounted in many countries, often with mixed results. In some instances, courts have struck down overreaching laws or demanded stronger privacy protections. In others, they have deferred to the government's assessment of national security threats. The debate ultimately comes down to where the line is drawn between reasonable protection and unnecessary intrusion. Every society must weigh its own values, threats, and institutional strengths to make that determination. But there is growing recognition among civil society organizations, human rights groups, and even some policymakers that constant vigilance is needed to prevent security measures from undermining the very freedoms they are meant to protect. Public awareness is a critical part of this equation. Informed citizens are better equipped to question official narratives, demand transparency, and hold governments accountable. Advocacy groups continue to push for stronger privacy laws, clearer legal limits on surveillance, and more robust oversight of both state and corporate actors in democratic societies. Such pressure can help prevent the erosion of civil liberties and ensure that national security does not become a cover for unchecked authority. As technology continues to evolve and new global threats emerge, the relationship between state power and personal freedom will remain a central issue. Finding the right balance is not a one-time task, but an ongoing process that requires transparency, accountability, and active public engagement. Without this, there is always a risk that exceptional measures will become the norm, and the freedoms that define open societies will quietly slip away.